There are 21 consonant letters in English, but there are 24 consonant sounds. We will look at each phoneme individually, how they are made in the body and where they are made in the body. Plosive sounds are made by stopping the airflow and then releasing the airflow in either the lips, the teeth, or the palate, which is the roof or top of your mouth. Nasal sounds are made by moving the air through your nose. So the air comes through your nose and not your mouth. Trill sounds are made by keeping your tongue in one place and by vibrating it. Tap sounds are made by a short closure, by closing the mouth, but these sounds are not used in British English. Fricative sounds are made by continuous friction across the whole sound. Approximates are made by little or no obstruction, so they flow through the mouth very freely. Lateral approximates are very similar to approximates, but they are made with the sides of the tongue. Affricates are a little different because they start as a plosive and they move into a fricative, so they combine two methods of articulation. Sibilant sounds are made by curling the tongue and making a hissing sound. We can also note that there are voiced sounds and unvoiced sounds. Voiced sounds are sounds that vibrate the vocal cords, and unvoiced means that the sound is not made by vibrating the vocal cord. So unvoiced and voiced are opposites in that regard. First, the bilabial consonants. The bilabial consonants are produced with the lips. Our first one is P. P. P is the unvoiced bilabial plosive. P. P. Pin. Please. Pizza. Pineapple. B. B is the voiced bilabial plosive. Believe. Ben. Blanket. Bar. Is the voiced bilabial nasal. Menu. Mic. Meat. Microphone. W. W is the voiced labialized velar approximate. Week. Winter. when, wool. Next are labiodental sounds. These are produced with the lips and the teeth. Is the unvoiced labiodental fricative. Free, France, flip, fry, v, v is the voiced labiodental fricative. Vinegar, Victor, very, vaccine. Dental consonants are made with the teeth and the tongue. This is a very English sound. Is the unvoiced dental fricative. Think, free, thistle, thank. Is the voiced dental fricative. Them, breathe, this, they. Alveolar consonants are made by putting the tongue near or on the roof of the mouth. T, t is the unvoiced alveolar plosive. Tin, tree, time, tell. D, d is the voiced alveolar plosive. Day, drink, date, drive. Is the voiced alveolar nasal. Nose, night, never, near. R, r is the voiced alveolar trill. Rain, right, random, reach. S, s is the unvoiced alveolar fricative. Sam, sight, see, steal. Z, z is the voiced alveolar fricative. Zoo, please. Zebra, tins. L is the voiced alveolar lateral approximant. Leaf, leave. Lemon, feel. Post-alveolar consonants are made by having the tongue near or on the roof of the mouth, but a little further back than alveolar consonants. Sh. Sh is the unvoiced post-alveolar fricative. Sheep, sheet. Shine, fish. Zh. Zh is the voiced post-alveolar fricative. Decision, usually. Television, measure. Ch, ch is the unvoiced post-alveolar affricate. Chair, China. Chin, peach. J, j is the voiced post-alveolar affricate. June, Joe. Jim, fudge. Palatal consonants are made by putting your tongue near or on the roof of your mouth, but further back than post-alveolar consonants. Y. Y is the voiced palatal approximant. Yellow, yeast. Yes. Yemen. Velar consonants are made with the back of the tongue and the roof of the mouth at the back. K. K is the unvoiced velar plosive. Cake, come. Cone, flake. G. G is the voiced velar plosive. Great, game. Grape, gate. Is the voiced velar nasal. Sing, mingle, bring, fling. Glottal consonants are a little bit different because they don't use parts of the mouth, but they do use your throat. The glottis. This is called the glottal stop. It is the unvoiced glottal plosive. Uh-oh. Is the unvoiced glottal fricative. Ham, hair, hat, high. In the previous video, we looked at each phoneme individually, how they are made and where they are made. How they are made is called the method of articulation. Where they are made is called the place of articulation. In this video, you will hear me say each phoneme 3 times. I'll do this slowly so you can go back and repeat it as many times as you like to help you practice. Mm. 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 W. 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 V. 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 z, 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 d, 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 mm, 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 r, 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 s, 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 z, 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 l, 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 sh, 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 ch, 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 j, j, y, 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 g, g, g. Mm, 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 uh, 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 You may have noticed that the only difference between two phonemes can be that one is voiced and the other is unvoiced. T and d. The only difference between these two sounds is that t is unvoiced, we don't vibrate the vocal cords, and d is voiced, we do vibrate the vocal cords. These can be very problematic for some speakers of English. We can call these voicing pairs. Another example is p and b. Another type of pair is the minimal pair. We will use this in the course because they're a great way of noticing a small difference between words. A minimal pair is two words with only one sound difference. Pin and bin are examples of this. We'll look at more examples. Time. Did you hear the word? Time. A minimal pair would be time and dime. This one started with the t sound. Time. Listen closely. Shin. A minimal pair would be shin and chin. In the test section, you will see minimal pairs to work through. Just like consonants, vowels are very, very important in order to be understood by English speakers. Vowels are even more important than consonants in order to sound British. Vowels are what makes British English British. There are far fewer vowels in other languages. British English can have up to 20 vowels. It's important to be able to notice these and to reproduce them as well. Vowels are characterised by their length. So we have short vowels and we have long vowels. How they are articulated is also important. So we look at the articulators. These are the jaws, the lips, and the tongue. The jaws can be close, half open, and open. So let's look at E. E. Can you see the jaws are close? Now look at A. The jaws are clearly open here. E. A. The tongue can be at the front of the mouth, central, or at the back of the mouth. This is a little harder to feel and to see, but you can feel it if you try to notice what's happening in your mouth. I. I. With I, can you feel your tongue towards the front of your mouth? And with can you feel it raised at the back of the mouth? The lips can be round or unround, like this. I. I. O. O. Can you see the difference? O is round or rounded. I is stretched or unround. This video looks at short and long vowels. We'll look at each phoneme individually and what the articulators are doing. We'll start with the short vowels. I. I. The jaws are close. The tongue is at the front of the mouth and the lips are unround. Pit. Sit. Gin. Sin. E. E. The jaws are in the middle. They are half open, half close. The tongue is at the front and the lips are unround. Pen, sentence, 10, lemon, ah, ah. The jaws are open. The tongue is at the front and the lips are unround. Pat, bat, Sam, fat, The jaws are in the middle. The tongue is in the centre, it's central. And the lips are relaxed. Ago. Can you hear the This is very special in British English. We'll explore this later. We can call this vowel the schwa. The jaws are half open. The tongue is central. And the lips are relaxed. Puff, shut, London, gun, oh, oh. The jaws are open. The tongue is at the back and the lips are round. Tom, shot, pot, knock, The jaws are open. The tongue is at the back and the lips are round. Put, soot, good, should. Those were the short vowels in British English. Now we'll go on to look at the long vowels. Remember, these are a little longer in length and take more time to say than the short vowels. E, E. The jaws are close. The tongue is at the front and the lips are unround and actually quite wide. Team, neat, sheep, speak, The jaws are in the middle, half open and half close. The tongue is central and the lips are relaxed. Shirt, turf, fur, work, are, the jaws are open. The tongue is at the back and the lips are round. Bath, father, smart, shark, or, the jaws are in the middle, half open, half close. The tongue is in the back and the lips are round. Salt, torn, door, floor, ooh, ooh. The jaws are close. The tongue is at the back and the lips are round. Soon, fruit, boom, clue. As well as short and long vowels, we also have two other types of vowels. These are diphthongs and triphthongs. You might also hear these pronounced as diphthongs and triphthongs, and both ways of pronouncing it are fine. We'll start with diphthongs. Diphthongs have two vowels that glide from one to the other without stopping. Our first one is A. 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 We start with an E and finish with an I. Table, shame, pay, lay, I. Starts with an A, ends in an I. Sky, night, eye, shine, oi, oi. Starts with an O, ends in an I. Coil, loiter, toy, boy, oh, O. Starts with an ends in U. Home. Cone. So. Low. Ow. Ow. Starts with the a and ends in u. Cloud. Mound. Frown. Town. Ear. Ear. Starts with an I, ends in a. Hear. Fear. Beard. Deer. Air. Air. Starts with an e, ends in a. Share. Pair. Hair. There. Ooh. Ooh. Starts with oo, ends in a. Sure. Pure. Tour. Lure. Triphthongs are like diphthongs, but they have 3 vowel sounds. They are effectively a diphthong that ends in a schwa. The first one is aya. 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 This moves from the a diphthong to the schwa. Player. Layer. Aya. Aya. This starts with the I diphthong and ends in the schwa. Iron. Science. Oya. Oya. This starts with the oi diphthong and ends in the schwa. Royal. Loyal. Oa. Oa. This starts with the o diphthong and ends in the schwa. Lower. Slower. Hour. Hour. Starts with the ow diphthong and ends in the schwa. flower, hour. We've now looked at short and long vowels and diphthongs and triphthongs. It's worth noting that some diphthongs and triphthongs, like for example ur, tour, we can now usually hear tor. It's being replaced with the or diphthong. It's also worth remembering that some vowel sounds are high priority. This means that they are very important to be able to replicate perfectly if you are to be understood and sound like you have a good accent. I and E. Can you hear the difference? Sounds like this are very important. For example, they are the difference between ship and sheep. Completely different words. It's also worth remembering that the schwa is distinctively British. If you can master the schwa and the use of the schwa, you will have a good accent in no time at all. Now we have explored all of the vowels. This is your opportunity to listen, repeat as many times as you like each vowel sound, short, long, diphthongs and triphthongs. I, 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 E, 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 A, 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 U, 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 O, 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 U, 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 E, 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 uh, 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 ah, 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 or, 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 ooh, 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 a, 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 I, 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 oi, 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 o, 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 ow, 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 ear, 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 air, 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 ooh, 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 a, 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 I, 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 oi, 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 o, 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 ow, ow, ow. A syllable is a unit of speech. This means we can choose any word and break it down into syllables. Let's look at penguin. We can say penguin has 2 syllables. Penguin. You cannot say penguin has 3 syllables. We cannot break this down into more or less than 2. If you're trying to break down a word into syllables, you can clap. This is a really common way, and it's effective as well, to count how many syllables are in a word. With penguin, we can all agree that the first syllable is peng and the second syllable is gwyn. It's difficult to break this word down into 2 syllables in different parts of the word. Now we can look at 7. 7 is a little more difficult because we can all agree it's 2 syllables, 7, but where do we split it? Is it seven or sev-un? The real answer to this is there is no correct answer, and native speakers often disagree when asked to split syllables in words. You could be thinking, why does that matter to me if I'm trying to improve my accent or sound like a native or speak with clearer English? And the answer is it doesn't really matter, but if you stress over trying to split syllables in the correct place, then you do not need to do that. Another thing to mention is you may see full stops in the IPA when splitting syllables. Now, we don't use that in this course because I would argue it's unnecessary, but you should be aware that this is how some people and some dictionaries split syllables, with a little full stop. I'll put an example here of penguin in the IPA, and as you can see, the full stop separates both the syllables. I don't believe this is important when transcribing because, as I mentioned, it can be difficult to choose the correct location to split the word, and I don't believe putting this in the transcription makes it any easier to read or transcribe a word. We can mark a consonant sound with C and a vowel sound with V. Many languages have a CV structure, an open syllable. English is a little different because we have a lot of closed syllables, and unfortunately this can make it difficult to pronounce. But we should talk about right now weak and strong syllables. Now, a weak syllable has a schwa in it. Sometimes you can find that it has a short vowel in it, but usually a schwa. And a strong syllable will have a long vowel, a diphthong, or it ends in two consonants. Individual words are made from a mixture of syllable types, weak and strong. And there's also word stress, which we look at in the next part of the module. Now, when consonants come together in a word, we can call these consonant clusters. And because they don't exist in all languages, it can be, as we've mentioned about other parts of English, it can be quite difficult for non-native speakers to pronounce these clusters. We have initial clusters, which are clusters before the vowel. We have medial clusters, which are clusters in the middle of the word with vowels either side. And we have final clusters, which are after the vowel. We'll look at an example of each one. So an example of the initial cluster would be spring. Spring. An example of a medial cluster would be movement. Movement. An example of a final consonant cluster would be months. Months. In terms of the structure, the maximum available would be 3 consonant sounds before the vowel and 4 consonant sounds together after the vowel. But this is rare. Because it's difficult sometimes for non-native speakers to pronounce consonant clusters, they do one of two things. One of these things is called consonant deletion. This is when they remove one of the consonants in the clusters to make it a little bit easier to pronounce. Unfortunately, this isn't the best thing to do, because it does make a non-native speaker sound like a non-native speaker. Native speakers of English do not delete consonants when they talk. A couple of examples of consonant deletion would be spun. Spun. We might hear it said as pun, removing the S. Obviously, it's a lot easier to say, but unfortunately, this would not make sense in a sentence. Another example would be break. Break. we may hear a non-native speaker say bake, which of course is not the same word and would not make sense in a sentence. In initial clusters, r is frequently deleted. In final clusters, it's common that r, l, t and d are deleted as well. Another thing that's common for non-native speakers to do when pronouncing consonant clusters is vowel insertion. This is when they introduce a vowel in between the consonants. So rather than removing a consonant, they will add an additional vowel which should not be there. An example of this would be brown. Brown. Maybe you'll hear brown. Brown. This is not correct. Brown is how the word should be pronounced. Another example of this would be scratch. Maybe with vowel insertion, someone could pronounce this as scratch. Scratch. This does make it sound like you have an accent, as unfortunately the scr consonant cluster is not clear. Once you're comfortable pronouncing consonant clusters accurately in syllables and words, you might want to move on to practicing some tongue twisters. Tongue twisters are a fun way to practice difficult consonant clusters and sentences. For example, the sixth twisty crisp. The sixth twisty crisp. Why is this difficult, you might ask? Well, in this small sentence, there are a lot of consonant clusters together. Feel free to write this tongue twister down in the practice document or somewhere else. And you can practice saying this, and there are other examples as well, and all of them are really good for helping with your pronunciation. Word stress works differently in every language. Some languages have a fixed word stress where the syllable in each word is stressed in the same place. English, however, is not like this. But what exactly is word stress? What is stress? Stress is a way of making a syllable stand out more than the others. We can do this by changing the volume, the pitch, the quality, or the length of the word. In English, pitch is the most important, but the other ones can have an impact on words as well. We have primary stress and secondary stress. Primary is the most stressed syllable in a word, and secondary stress is more stressed than the other syllables, but not as much as the primary stressed syllable. Now, we should mark primary stress and secondary stress when we are transcribing a word. So we use this symbol for primary stress, and we use this symbol for secondary stress, and this comes just before the syllable that is stressed. Let's look at a word. Protect. Protect. Listen carefully. The second syllable is stressed. It has primary stress, and because there is no secondary stress, we can just say the second syllable is stressed. protect, protect. Okay, now listen carefully at the first syllable. I'll say it again. Protect. The first syllable is weak because we have a schwa sound. Protect, protect. Now I'm going to say another word and maybe you can try and figure out where the primary and secondary stress, if it has it, goes. Okay, before I explain why, of course. So, here's the word. Apologetic. 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 Now, pol does sound stressed, but it's not the most stressed syllable in the word. Je is the most stressed syllable in the word. So we can say je has primary stress, pol has secondary stress. And can you hear the at the beginning? It's weak, it's a schwa. Apologetic. There's a schwa in the middle as well, of course, it's weak. And an ick at the end of the word. Now, in weak syllables, if it's not a schwa, it is usually an I sound as the short vowel. Apologetic. Unfortunately, in English, there is no way to be 100% certain that a new word you hear is stressed correctly. The best way to do it is when you learn a new word in English, it's to write down, to remember where the stress is secondary and primary. And if there's a word you're not 100% sure about, go and look in a pronunciation dictionary and look at the IPA, look at the transcription of the word and see where the stress is in the word. If you don't have a favoured dictionary on where you go to look up the pronunciation of certain words, there are some suggestions and further reading suggestions at the end of the course. Now, there are some rules with word stress, and I want to reiterate before I read some of them out that they only provide a guide, and I don't use rules much on this course, and I don't believe in teaching them because there's just far too many exceptions and it causes confusion. Why is this like this if it goes against the rules? And the fact is, English is just a mash of different languages and problems with rules, etc. So please take this with a pinch of salt. Number one, word stress can be determined by the grammatical function. It can be determined by whether it's a compound or a complex word. It can be determined by the syllable structure and also how many syllables there are in it. Number two, the word stress is usually on the first syllable in two-syllable nouns, unless the final syllable, the second syllable, is strong. Number three, two-syllable adjectives follow the same rules as two-syllable nouns. Number four, two-syllable verbs usually have word stress on the second syllable, unless the second syllable is weak or has an O sound. Number five, is that the word stress can change the meaning of the word completely in word class pairs. Number 6. In 3-syllable nouns, the word stress is usually on the first syllable, unless there is a strong syllable elsewhere in the word. Number 7. The word stress in 3-syllable verbs is usually on the last syllable, unless that syllable is weak. Number 8. Complex and compound words have their own rules, but these are very complicated. It's too hard to remember all of these rules, and it will take up a lot of your time. But if you are interested, please feel free to look these rules up. I will not be covering them further in this course. After reading the rules out, I would like to reiterate that they are only a guide, and the best way to be certain about the word stress in a word is to look it up in a pronunciation dictionary. I mentioned word class pairs in the rules, and you may have wondered, what exactly are they? They are a pair of words that have the same consonant and vowels. The only difference is that the word stress is different, and it's the word stress that, as I mentioned in the rules, makes them completely different words. For example, project and project. You can hear in the noun version of the word project, the word stress is on the first syllable. In the verb form of the word project, the word stress is in the second syllable, and they are completely different words. And it's also worth pointing out as well, project, that first sound, the schwa, project. Project is weak. The first syllable on the verb form is weak. Now, speaking of weak syllables and the schwa, it's a good idea to think of British people as lazy. Think of them as just wanting to stay at home and play video games all day. It's very true. But British people are also very lazy sometimes when it comes to language. We use these things called weak forms. Weak forms are made from common words like for, you, an, to, and we use a schwa with them. So instead of you, we'd say y. Y. Instead of to, we'd say t. T. Instead of for, we'd say f. F. Okay? And there are many other weak forms as well, not just these words, and you can hear them when you speak to a British native speaker a lot. Let's look at an example sentence. So, where are you from? Where are you from? In fast, casual speak, it would be pronounced like this. Where are you from? Where are you from? Where are you from? Okay, these are used with the weak forms, normally. Of course, if you want to be understood in English, both are okay. If you want to sound like a native speaker, you will need to use weak forms with these common words. Where are you from? The best way to practice using weak forms is to use them in your speaking and try to notice when weak forms come from listening to native speakers as well. Maybe you can listen to these videos. Listen out for the weak forms that I use as well, because I will use them a lot. Before we start this module, let's look back and see what we've spoken and learned about before. We started with consonants, then we looked at vowels, both of which are looking at the individual sounds that we make in English. Then we moved on to look at syllables and stress, how to form words using these. Now we move on to connected speech, because in any language you don't just say one word and the next word, you make sentences with these words. The first thing we need to learn is accentuation. And accentuation is making words in a sentence stand out more than others. A bit like what word stress does to a word, accentuation does to a sentence. Let's look at an example sentence. I stood on that tree trunk for half an hour. I stood on that tree trunk for half an hour. I stood on that tree trunk for half an hour. Can you hear that some words are a little louder than the others? Not every word is pronounced exactly the same way. You may be able to guess which words stand out more than the others. I stood on that tree trunk for half an hour. Stood is the first one that is emphasized, accentuated more than the others. Stood. Tree trunk is also one that is accentuated. And half is the next one, and hour is the last one. Now we can break sentences like these down into content words and function words. The words that stood out in that sentence, the words that were accentuated, that were longer and louder than the other ones, are the content words. Stood, tree trunk, half, hour. These words were content words. Now function words were the on, I, that. Okay, so these words were pronounced quieter and shorter than the content words in the sentence. If you don't know what the content words are in a particular sentence, or you don't know what the function words are, the content words are a little more important than the function words. Of course, in a sentence, we need both to be grammatically accurate. But the content words convey, give the listener more meaning and more understanding to the situation. Let's look at our sentence again. I stood on that tree trunk for half an hour. Now let's remove the function words, so we only have content words in the sentence. Stood, tree trunk, half hour. Now, obviously, this is not grammatically correct, but we do get an idea of what the speaker is trying to say. If we remove these content words and only have function words, I, on that, for, an, unfortunately, the listener will have no idea what the speaker is talking about. So this is clear. Content words are far more important, and this is why we accentuate them in connected speech. It's really up to the speaker as to what words they will accentuate. The speaker might accentuate new information to the listener as well, to make it stand out in the sentence. This is something you can play around with, but the general idea is that content words are more accentuated than the function words in a sentence. Now we've looked at accentuation and you understand how native speakers accentuate particular words in a sentence. We can look at rhythm. Now it's the accentuation that makes the rhythm of a language. And when native speakers listen to people speaking their language, they expect to hear the rhythm of that language. And not having the rhythm of a language will make the speaker sound foreign, sound like a non-native speaker. It can be very difficult to try and copy the rhythm of a language that is not your native language. Of course, just like every other part of learning pronunciation, it will take time. These videos and these materials are there for you to learn as you go through your English learning journey, not to make you a complete native speaker in a matter of weeks. Rhythm in pronunciation studies is a debated topic. There is a lot of disagreement about certain things. English is considered to be a stress-based language, opposed to a syllable-based language. What this means is that the rhythm of English is the same no matter how many syllables there are in a sentence. Of course, a syllable-based language would be the opposite. The rhythm would depend on the number of syllables. Let's look at a sentence. Phil rushed home. Let's clap the rhythm of this sentence. Phil rushed home. If we said the sentence a little bit faster, Phil rushed home. Now let's add some more words to this sentence and make it a little longer. Phil finished work and rushed home. Again, let's clap to see if we can notice the rhythm of the sentence. Phil finished work and rushed home. Can you see that the claps are falling on obviously content words, but also that those syllables are longer and more accentuated, and it's this that makes the rhythm. Phil finished work and rushed home. Of course, as British native speakers, if we're using accentuation in our sentences in connected speech, we're going to be using weak forms and also strong forms. So weak forms do play a big part in the rhythm and in the connected speech. I'm going to give you 3 rules to do with weak forms and strong forms in connected speech, and I would like to reiterate again that connected speech is something that is important to try and sound like a native, but rules are not fixed, as I explained in a previous video. So as we say, take them with a pinch of salt, but I hope they do help you in identifying when weak forms and strong forms show up in sentences. Number 1, we wouldn't use a weak form at the end of a sentence. What are you looking at? What are you looking at? We wouldn't use the weak form of at the end of a sentence. Number 2, if we're using that word and putting emphasis on that word, we also would not use the weak form. Well, what do you want? Well, what do you want? We would not use the weak form of do, de, in this sentence if we are emphasizing the word. Well, what do you want? This is not what we'd say. If there was no emphasis on do, well, what do you want? Well, what do you want? This is fine, but with emphasis we must use the strong form. Well, what do you want? Number 3. Just like if we are emphasizing a word, if we are using that word as a contrast, we would also use the strong form. So, well, what do you want? Well, what do you want? Again, we wouldn't use the weak form y if we are contrasting like this. Well, what do you want? Those are really the only rules we need to know to understand about the rhythm, about the accentuation of sentences in English, and I hope you get a feel for the rhythm. I hope when you say some sentences you are able to clap and try to figure out the rhythm, and when you are speaking to someone, a native speaker of English, can you hear the rhythm? Can you hear what syllables are longer and why are they making those syllables longer? Have an experiment when you are speaking English, and I hope that you can throw in some weak forms as well. When you speak a language fluently, you usually speak faster, especially if you're speaking to someone who's also fluent in the language. If we look closer at the language being used, we can see changes, and we call them modifications. In English, we can note 3 modifications that are important for speech that sounds fluent, sentences that come together and make it sound like a real native sentence. These three things are elision, assimilation, and linking. If your aim is to sound like you have a British accent, then these three modifications are important to use in your sentences. First, we look at elision. Elision is when phonemes disappear from connected speech. Elision is also called contractions when you're looking at verbs. But for now, let's look at this noun. Say it. How would you pronounce this noun? Chocolate. Chocolate. There is a schwa sound in the middle. Chocolate. In fast connected speech, there would be elision with this schwa sound. Chocolate. Chocolate. The schwa is removed. I'll have a hot chocolate, please. So in unstressed syllables, we often lose this weak vowel. It can also happen when we have l and n. When these come after a weak vowel, we often lose it, and the consonant before becomes syllabic. A syllabic consonant is when the consonant is its own syllable, but we don't really have a vowel. An example of this is police becoming police. Police. In consonant clusters, it's common that the middle consonant disappears. So, acts. Acts could become axe, which is a different word, absolutely. But in connected speech, it will be completely understandable. He acts up after work. He acts up after work. In weak forms of pronouns, the H, the is often omitted. So you could say, tell her no. With the weak form, tell her no. Or with the elision, you can say, tell her no. Tell her no. Of course, there's contractions as well. So she will become she'll. She'll. But this is taught at elementary levels of English because obviously they are different spellings completely. She'll go to town with me. The next form of modification is assimilation. Now there are two types of assimilation. There is regressive assimilation and progressive assimilation. Regressive assimilation is when the first sound of the second word affects the last sound of the first word. For example, this shoe would become this shoe. This shoe. Progressive assimilation is when the last sound of the first word affects the first sound of the second word. For example, will there would become will there. Will there. In British English, there are some very common modifications that use assimilation. For example, would you is frequently spoken as would ya. Of course, we have that weak vowel y at the end, but we also have some assimilation in the middle. Would ya. These kind of modifications are fine if you're talking with a friend. In fact, they're kind of expected if you're talking with a British accent or you're talking with British people. But they are slightly informal. So I would avoid using these kinds of would ya, gonna, these kind of modifications if you're trying to be professional. The next kind of modification is linking. Now it's similar to elision and assimilation because we use other phonemes to link words together. And this is the last modification we need to learn for connected speech. The first type of linking is consonant to vowel linking. Now when we have a word that ends in a consonant and the next word ends in a vowel, sometimes they link together to create one word almost. So laugh at would be pronounced laugh at. The second kind of linking is vowel to vowel, and we can have intrusive w and y sounds. For example, she is ends in a vowel and starts with a vowel. She is would be pronounced she is. There's a y sound, intrusive y, we call it. She is. The next kind of linking is linking with r. So in British English, we don't always pronounce the r on the end of some words. For example, here are. With linking with r, we can hear here are. The final kind of linking is with r, and it's like the last one, but these sounds don't have a r in them. Take media event, for example. With intrusive r, we can hear media event. Of course, these videos are not to give you all of the examples there are. That's just impossible. And learning them each would take so much time and you'd forget all of them. We develop these connected speech patterns by speaking, by listening, by noticing what we hear when we speak to people. So I hope this video has helped with the connected speech. Before we go on to talk about intonation, I just want to congratulate you for reaching the last module on the course. A lot of information has been packed into these videos and the materials, and if you've been doing the test sections before going on to the next module as well, then you've worked really hard and you're doing a fantastic job, and I really hope you've seen good improvement in your accent up to this point. Now, I'm going to say something controversial. Some people will disagree with me, including yourself, and that is absolutely fine. In my opinion, intonation is a personal thing. With intonation, you are expressing your personality. Not every British native has the same intonation. The points in the material and in the video that I'm going to make will give you some ideas of why people speak this way, this kind of intonation that they're using and why they choose to use it. Intonation for me is allowing yourself to express your personality, and it's something that you can experiment with. You don't have to listen to native speakers all the time and try to copy exactly what they are saying. The other modules, I would argue, you can take part out of what native speakers are saying, for example, consonant and vowels. But with intonation, you can be you. You do what you want to do and how you want to talk. Now, intonation is important because there are some ways you can express meaning through intonation. Now, I've said the word enough. I should probably explain what it means. If you don't know, of course. Intonation is the change in pitch. And yes, it can be very powerful. If I make a noise without saying any words, you might be able to take some meaning. Let's try it. What did you get from that? What do you think I meant from just raising my pitch like that? Of course, we'll talk about this in a moment. But I also want to say at this point, babies hear intonation when they are in the womb. Before they are born, they are listening to intonation, changes in pitch, before they can hear words. Communicating takes a lot of effort. We use a lot of brain power when we are speaking. Because we do this, we break down utterances, sentences into thought groups. Now, we split sentences into thought groups when they are longer because it helps us to register what we have said and what we are going to say. You would not hear a really long sentence that is not broken down into thought groups, and you wouldn't expect to hear this either. We can do 5 things to split an utterance or sentence into thought groups. The first thing is pause. The second thing is to change the pitch. The third thing is to change the last syllable length. The fourth thing is change the key, like you do in music. And the fifth thing is to make a syntactic boundary. And this is a change in grammar, which shows that one thought group is different than the other. we can mark a change in thought group using these symbols. Now let's look at a sentence. When the water was cold, the children didn't like it. When the water was cold, the children didn't like it. Where do you think the two thought groups are? Of course, we wouldn't say this sentence in one go, like this. When the water was cold, the children didn't like it. We pause in between. When the water was cold, the children didn't like it. And it's here that the thought group is split. When we look at a thought group, we can find the tonic syllable. The tonic syllable is the most prominent, the strongest syllable in the thought group. We can name every part of the thought group. As well as the tonic syllable, we have the head. And the head is everything from the first stressed syllable in the thought group to the tonic syllable. And the onset is in the head. The onset is that first stressed syllable. The prehead is everything before, all of the unstressed syllables before the onset, before the head. And we also have the tail, which comes after the tonic syllable, and it's all of the stressed, unstressed syllables that come after the tonic syllable. So let's look at the sentence we just spoke about. When the water was cold, the children didn't like it. We'll take the second thought group. The children didn't like it. Which one do you think is the tonic syllable? I'll say it again. The children didn't like it. If you said like, you are correct. The children didn't like it. Like is the tonic syllable. It's prominent. It stands out in the thought group. Can you hear the head, the onset? The children didn't like it. If you said children, you're correct. Chill is the onset. Children didn't would be the entire head. And the would then be the prehead. And it would be the tail. The children didn't like it. That was a lot of information to take in about thought groups. So feel free to write down that sentence or even another one. It's great practice. Another example, of course, will be provided in the practice document. So have a look at some sentences and split them down, because this visual representation will help a lot when you are trying to listen to thought groups. Now we've spoken about thought groups, we need to talk about tone and tone choices. There are 5 tone choices that we use in English. We have the rise, the fall, the rise fall, the fall rise, and the level. Now each of these, when we choose to use them, can convey a different meaning, like I mentioned earlier in the video. We'll start with the rise tone. The rise tone can start low and go to the middle, or it can start in the middle and go high. The rise tone is the second most popular tone in English. You can hear it a lot in questions and in lists as well. We'll use the word yes for our examples of tone choice. So yes in the rise would be yes, yes. The second tone choice is the fall tone. The fall tone can start in the middle and go down, or it can start high and go down. And the higher it starts, the more emotion you are expressing. If you want to express a lot of emotion, you will start high and go down. Big contrast, big difference. This is also the most common tone you'll hear in English. You'll hear it in everyday speech and in commands. We'll use the word yes again. Yes. Yes. The third tone choice is rise and fall. Rise, fall. It's often seen in emphatic statements, but it's not as common as the rise or the fall tone. Yes. Yes. The next tone choice is the fall rise. It's also not as common as the others, and you'll often hear this one when someone is unsure of something or only wants to agree with something a little bit. Yes. Yes. The last tone choice available is level, which is flat. And it is common in English, not as much as rise or fall, however. You'll often hear this when someone is trying to express that maybe they're bored, or maybe they just are bored. Yes. Yes. That should be enough information for you to be able to listen and notice the intonation patterns when people are talking, and certainly you should be able to try yourself to implement these intonation ideas. If you want further examples, you can look in the practice document. Before I end the video, I'd like to say if you look in the practice document, there are some tips at the end, and they also explain the functions of intonation if you are particularly interested in more intonation ideas. In my opinion, the most important parts of intonation, and the parts that you should practice more than the others, are where to split the thought groups, and also the tone choice, and which syllable stands out the most in the thought group. I really hope you've enjoyed working through the videos and the materials, and I'd love to hear from you, whether it's suggestions or ideas, or you just want to get in touch. Congratulations on getting this far. I hope you've enjoyed it.